Hey, what's going on, guys? This is your brother Big D with Blerdplanet.com. I'm going to read some interesting statistics before we watch this video. Um, it's really very alarming. While people of color make up about 30% of the United States population, they account for 60% of those in prison. The prison population grew by 700% from 1970 to 2005, a rate that is outpacing crime and population rates. The incarceration rates disproportionately impact men of color. 1 in every 15 African American men and 1 in every 36 Hispanic men are incarcerated, in comparison to 1 in every 106 white men. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1 in 3 black men can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. Individuals of color have a disproportionate number of encounters with law enforcement, indicating that racial profiling continues to be a problem. A report by the Department of Justice found that blacks and Hispanics were approximately 3 times more likely to be searched during a traffic stop than white motorists. African Americans are twice as likely to be arrested and almost 4 times as likely to experience the use of force during encounters with the police. Students of color face harsher punishments in school than their white peers, leading to a higher number of youth of color incarcerated. Black and Hispanic students represent more than 70% of those involved in school-related arrests or referrals to law enforcement. Currently, African Americans make up 2/5 and Hispanics make up 1/5 of youth confined today. According to recent data by the Department of Education, African American students are arrested far more than their white classmates. The data showed that 96,000 students were arrested and 242,000 referred to law enforcement by schools during the 2009-2010 school year. Of those students, black and Hispanic students made up more than 70% of arrested or referred students. Harsh school punishments, from suspensions to arrest, have led to high numbers of youth of color coming into contact with the juvenile justice system and at an earlier age. African American youth have higher rates of juvenile incarceration and are more likely to be sentenced to adult prison. According to the Sentencing Project, even though African American juvenile youth are about 16% of the youth population, 37% of their cases are moved to criminal court, and 58% of African American youth are sent to adult prisons. As the number of women incarcerated has increased by 800% over the last 3 decades, women of color have been disproportionately represented. While the number of women incarcerated is relatively low, the racial and ethnic disparities are startling. African American women are 3 times more likely than white women to be incarcerated, while Hispanic women are 69% more likely than white women to be incarcerated. The war on drugs has been waged primarily in communities of color, where people of color are more likely to receive higher offenses. According to the Human Rights Watch, people of color are no more likely to use or sell drugs than whites, but they have higher rates of arrest. African Americans comprise 14% of regular drug users, but are 37% of those arrested for drug offenses. From 1980 to 2007, 1 in 3 of the 25.4 million adults arrested for drugs was African American. Once convicted, black offenders receive longer sentences compared to white offenders. The U.S. Sentencing Commission stated that in the federal system, black offenders receive sentences that are 10% longer than white offenders for the same crimes. The Sentencing Project reports that African Americans are 21% more likely to receive mandatory minimum sentences than white defendants are 20% more likely to be sentenced to prison. Voter laws that prohibit people of color with felony convictions to vote disproportionately impact men of color. An estimated 5.3 million Americans are denied the right to vote based on past felony conviction. Felony disenfranchisement is exaggerated by racial disparities in the criminal justice system, ultimately denying 13% of African American men the right to vote. Felony disenfranchisement policies have led to 11 states denying the right to vote to more than 10% of the African American population. Studies have shown that people of color face disparities in wage trajectory following release from prison. Evidence shows that spending time in prison affects wage trajectories with a disproportionate impact on black men and women. The results show no evidence of racial divergence in wages prior to incarceration. However, following the release from prison, wages grow at a 21% slower rate for black former inmates than compared to white ex-convicts. A number of states have bans on people with certain convictions working in domestic health service industries such as nursing, child care, and home health care, areas in which many poor women and women of color are disproportionately concentrated. I'm going to read something about how the black boys and black men in reading and literacy. Ready? This comes from an article from David Miller. Only 12% of black fourth grade boys are proficient in reading, compared with 38% of white boys, and only 12% of black eighth grade boys are proficient in math, compared with 44% of white boys. Literacy remains a key piece of the puzzle if we want to ensure that boys of color are making academic strides to close the achievement gap. Greater emphasis on early intervention and working with families are just a few solutions to get boys K-3 excited about reading. Additionally, creating book clubs and writing circles for young males of color are strategies to improve fluency, comprehension, and strengthen vocabulary. At Blerd Planet, we believe that in a black intelligentsia. We also believe that all black men, well, actually all people, are encouraged to be able to read and read at a proficient level. This video is a video about the conspiracy to destroy black boys. I hope you enjoy and have a good day. Bye.
And now, here is Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu with his penetrating presentation of countering the conspiracy to destroy black boys.
There's no topic that concerns me more than the one on the conspiracy to destroy black boys. And the reason is when our little boys are in preschool and primary grades, they're very innocent and very enthusiastic about learning. But something happens to that, and we need to find out what that is. My younger son is on the cover of this particular book, and I would like for him to grow up to be a man. Like many of you already told me, that you have sons and male students as well. Now there's two parts of the conspiracy, Volume 1, and this is Volume 2. In Volume 1, we raised 4 questions. First question is, when did the conspiracy start? Who is against black boys? Why is there a conspiracy against them? And what exactly is the conspiracy? That's in Volume 1. In Volume 2, we look at the relationships between mothers and their sons. That must be studied. We also must look at female teachers and black male students. That must also be studied. We must look at some case studies. In other words, many of us are doing a very good job developing black boys to be men. What is it that some of us are doing that others are not doing? And then last but not least, a program called the Rites of Passage into Manhood. See, it used to be we knew when black boys became men. But now many of us don't know when we're men. It's how much reefer we smoke, how much wine we drink, how many babies we make. Until black men spell it out to black boys what it means to be a man, this conspiracy will continue. But let's go back to Volume 1. When did it start? And as we begin to look at that, I want to also share with you why we call it a conspiracy to destroy black boys. You see, contrary to belief at birth, there are more black boys born in the world than there are girls. It's close, but it's 1.03 black boys born in the world to 1.0 black girls. Hear me clearly. At birth, black boys outnumber black girls 1.03 to 1.0. A brief 18 years later, it is now 1.0 available, and that's the key word, available black men, to 1.8 available black women. Almost 2 adult women for every 1 adult man. Now the only question that should be going through your minds right now is what happened? We keep raising the wrong question. We keep asking, why do black men hang on corners? Why do black men lack direction? Well, if you ask this question, you're asking the question 18 to 30 years too late. It is not a conspiracy to destroy black men. It's a conspiracy to destroy black boys. If you destroy him as a boy, he'll never become a man. And I can look around the room and tell you know where are they. If they are not available to black women, where are they? Call the roll. In jail, there are 329,000 brothers in prison right now. 1 of every 4 brothers will go to prison. Where else? Or death. There's numerous ways that we die. There's homicide, suicide, drugs, war, high blood pressure, and the leading killer among black men, lung cancer. Our love for cigarettes, especially cool. Smoke them all day long, die the exact same way, cool. Where else? We have prison, death. What else to make us unavailable to black women? Yes, homosexuality. As you said earlier, 1 of every 9 men in this country are homosexual. Where else? Yes.
Hospitalized, institutionalized.
Okay, so institutionalization, and there's not only in terms of hospitals, but also mental institutions, and of course, when they get released, many times being homeless. There's still one other large popular area. Thimby?
They marry white women.
Okay, interracial marriages. Now I want to pause there for a moment, because you would think if anybody is going to marry outside the race, it would be black women. You got 2 black women for every 1 black man. Thousand are brothers. That means 48,000 sisters. It's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of black men to black women marrying outside the race. But remember, as you said in the earlier workshop, if the definition of beauty is light skin, long hair, and blue eyes, why stop with Renee, the light-skinned sister? Why not get you the real thing? There's some serious problems here. And then black men tell me, I can't find a black woman to understand me. You mean out of 20 million black women, you can't find one to understand you? You don't need a white woman, you need a psychiatrist. But that's another workshop on relationships. But I just want to share with you, we got some very serious problems. But to tease this audience, black women are tired of being by themselves. And in the earlier issue of Essence magazine, the article said, guess who's coming to dinner now? Black women are tired of being by themselves. In other words, brothers, you can't have it both ways. You can't have 2 black women to choose from and still marry a white woman. You can't have it both ways. Black women are tired of being by themselves. Now, that's with regards to the stats, why we wrote the book, because we saw the shortage of black men. But what we want to begin to find out is, when did it start? You see, it's called the 4th grade syndrome. Studies show that black boys may be the best students in the country up until the 4th grade. So we wanted to find out what your son, a male student, was doing at the beginning of the 3rd grade, then at the end of the 7th grade, and then measure the progress. Let me give you 3 examples. We had a little boy 5 years ago on the Alva reading test score at the 98th percentile in the country. In other words, a walking genius. That means only 2% male, female, white, or black had a higher score than he at the beginning of the 3rd grade. At the end of 7th grade, the same boy now drops down to the 35th percentile. Engineer potential here, pimp or pusher now, scores should have improved 5 years, instead they only improved 1.3. 2 more examples. We had a little boy at the 92nd percentile. He dropped down to the 24th percentile, and his scores only improved 2.1. But let me give you the average example. We had a little boy at the 63rd percentile. He dropped down to the 4th percentile, and his scores didn't improve a year, a month, a week, not even a day. There are 3 critical stages in black boys' development: infancy to 9, 9 to 13, and 13 to 18. You see, it's easy to see the negative behavior here when he's already dropped out, laid up on some street corner lacking direction. It's more difficult to see it around 9 years of age, when they begin to sit further in the back of the class, when they begin to ask less questions, when their ball becomes more important than their book, when they begin to cheat on their tests. We appeal to you to turn your sons and male students on early. Teach them how to read early. Teach them the beauty of being black and believing in God early. But many of us have waited, and we have waited almost too late to develop black boys to be men. You know what I'm getting at. America spends $2,300 on Head Start. They spend $38,000 on prison. If Reagan wanted to balance the budget, I can show you save about $36,000 per person. It's much easier to educate than it is to incarcerate. Now you raise the questions. How long do you stay in Head Start? Year? 2 years is the most? How long do you stay in prison? The rest of your life? Question number 1. Question number 2. Does Head Start work? A 19-year study documents that Head Start works. But in prison, 85% of the inmates that get released go right back in. But as Jesse Jackson says, we have 2 choices. We can either send me to Penn State or to State Penn. It's your choice. We have got to find ways to intervene. Now we have a whole workshop just on the 4th grade syndrome. I now want to ask you, what are some of the reasons you feel to explain why black students, especially black boys, were doing so well K through 3, and now scores declining in the intermediate and upper grades? What explains it? Yes?
The learning style changes abruptly in 4th grade from what might have been more right brain activities in the primary grades into all of a sudden all left brain activities.
Okay, so a change in learning styles or methodology from the teacher. from a holistic learning style to a left brain. Okay, very good. Any others? Yes.
I think that there's a lot of rejection on the part of the female teachers in the classroom.
And the rejection increases with the upper grades? Why do you think it increases?
Because of the students, perhaps his natural makeup, hyperactivity and that sort of thing.
And that may be increasing? Well, it may be increasing because we're now expecting them to stay in school or stay in a chair even longer. Okay. Any others that contribute to this fourth grade syndrome? We have a change in learning style. We have the teacher's outlook on the student. What else? Yes?
The student becomes more culturally aware and differs significantly from the teacher often.
Okay. So the child's now becoming more aware of their culture and racial identity. Okay. Very good. Any others? The major reason you have not given yet, and that's why this problem is still with us. Terry? First name is?
Richard.
I'm sorry, Richard.
Well, the peer group starts to form and become stronger without the peer
And
group.
that's unfortunate, Richard, that you said that, because as the age increases, the peer pressure is on the increase, while parental involvement is on a decrease. I don't know who told parents when your child gets older, they need less of your time rather than more. When I speak to Head Start parents, 80% of them are there. Elementary school, 30%. High school, almost a joke. We have to work on that. That's another workshop, too, on parenting all the way through, not just in those quote-unquote tender years. But the major reason, it's not on the board yet. Still looking for it. Yes. Go in.
I think, too, that young boys, and particularly young black boys, in the primary grades, they have many mother figures, and they have very few men figures, and particularly black male figures. And I think it makes a big difference come grade 4.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's the major reason. And let me now get my first position. I sincerely believe to get some white ball players, I'm going to do that. If it means going extra step to get some black students in debate and science fairs, I'm going to do that. Because they are committed to having students involved in both academic and athletic competition. Because it sharpens your skills. And we are concerned about that. In other words, let's move away from the varsity approach to the academics, where you only have the top 1 or 2 students representing the school. We believe in the intramural approach. We believe in a class of 30 students, let's have 6 teams of 5 players. Let's have everyone involved in athletics. Let's have everyone involved in academics, because competition sharpens the skills. But you know what's sad? Even schools give more glory to their ball players than their scholars. In other words, for the basketball winners, they get these big trophies. For the debate team, they get these little certificates. Where are the pep rallies for the honor roll? In other words, we give them to the basketball team, but why not to the academic scholars and achievers as well? In other words, we are illustrating where our priorities are. We want to change that priority. We've got to find ways to infiltrate the peer group, to get them all involved in both academic and athletic competition. Some other ideas on this. The University of Michigan did a study when you and I were growing up, and they wanted to find out what was the major influence on children. The University of Michigan reports in 1950 that the greatest influence on children was the home, followed closely by school, then church, then peer group, then television. Now, Gwen, you probably call these the good old days. Home, school, church, peer group, and television. Hold your brothers, we give you 1980, 1985. Home is still number 1, but the streets, the peer group, that's what we're talking about, is now in the number 2 position. Television and video games are number 3, predicting number 1 sometime this year. School has now dropped down to the 4th position, and I'm sorry you can't find church anywhere on a map. A whole lot has happened in 30 years. I want to again pause and look at the peer group, your greatest source of competition. In other words, the power of the peer group is because they look like each other. You will always emulate those people that look like you. What am I getting at? To connect it to the classroom? I became a writer to make sure I'm not misquoted. A white teacher can teach a black child math because expectations transcend race. Don't misquote me. I'm in no way saying that a white teacher cannot teach a black child because expectations transcend race. But a white teacher cannot teach a black child how to be black. In other words, in order to be a black engineer, you need to see a black engineer. The power of the peer group, they look like each other. In other words, when I ask black boys across the country to name me 5 black male entertainers, they don't have a problem. Name 5 black male athletes, they don't have a problem. But when I ask them to name me 5 black men with college degrees, they have all kinds of problems. In other words, if we cannot increase black staff at your school, then what I recommend you do, like what St. Louis is doing, is have a central role model program. So we begin to bring in black role models on a regular basis. So we don't want to take the white teacher out of class, but if he or she has to stay there, then we want every week or at least once a month role models coming in so our youth can see black achievers. And we need to centralize that kind of program. The power of the peer group, they look like each other. Another secret about the peer group. You see, in most classes, let me do it this way, I'll use another sheet. In most classrooms, you have 30 students and you have one teacher. And it's almost 30 against 1. That's how it's phrased. 30 against 1. You always lose with odds like that. We have got to find ways to get the odds in our favor. In other words, I recommend that a teacher identify who the leaders are. You see, we must get them to buy into our value system. We must find ways to infiltrate the peer group, to inculcate our value system into theirs. And that first of all means identifying who the leaders are. And let me give you a secret. The leaders don't walk around saying, with a t-shirt, I'm the leader, I'm running the class. They do it with body language. They do it with eye contact. And so the first step is, do you know how to identify the leader? And then once you do, either before school, after school, or some break, pull him or her over to the side and try to inculcate your value system into theirs. Then they will begin to proselytize the other parts of the peer group. We have got to get more of the peer group buying into our value system. You see, the peer group does not have to be negative. It can also be positive. The question is, which value system they're going to promote. We have to begin to look at those kinds of issues. And so we recommend these kinds of strategies for the peer group. We recommend that, first of all, we begin to put more priorities on our academic achievement over athletic achievement. We also recommend moving away from the varsity approach to the intramural approach. We recommend that you identify who the leaders are. We recommend we bring in more role models to our program, provide pep rallies for academic achievement. But my major concern here is that schools are more than academic institutions. They are also social institutions. It is sad to say this, but you could have been doing your job. Parents could have been doing their job. And it all goes for naught because the black and Hispanic peer group are reinforcing what kind of gym shoes they wear, what kind of clothes they wear, how well they fight or dance, and not academic achievement. This is not theoretical. I was in honors classes when I was in high school, and I was so influenced by my peer group, I flunked the whole marking period intentionally, trying to get kicked out. Had it not been for my father, who then kicked my butt, I'd had some very serious problems realizing his size 11 of my rear end was more important than my peer group. But let me give you a secret. When you want to reinforce academic achievement, especially for black boys, it becomes suicidal if he's not also involved in the martial arts. In other words, I was still in honors programs, but I was allowed to run track and also martial arts because my peer group did not respect my honors achievement, but they did respect my martial arts belt. We have to begin to look at those kinds of areas. Before we move on to the next area with regards to parents, any comments about the peer group? Its tremendous impact on academic achievement. Any comments or questions? You got 30 seconds, so I'm moving on. Yes, sir. First name?
Michael.
Michael.
What can teachers do to influence this in the context of a classroom situation?
Well, I tried to mention a couple, Michael. One, I wanted you to identify who the leaders were and begin to sell your value system to them. Secondly, I wanted you to bring more role models into your classroom so they can see blacks in high professions that advance themselves. Three, I wanted you to provide, or with your school, to provide more academic achievement in terms of glorifying that, in terms of pep rallies and trophies and the like. Any other comments about the peer group? A major source of competition. Another area, parents. We're very concerned about the role of parents with regards to our schools. And one of our concerns, there's a distinction between involvement and support. These two words are not the same, but they're used synonymously. We want to begin to look at that. Parental involvement and parental support. Parental involvement is attending a PTA meeting, baking baked goods for a bake sale, selling raffle tickets for a raffle sale. Look, if I never attend your PTA meeting, but I monitor my child's peer group, I monitor television, we go to the library on a regular basis, that's support. Now, I know you want them both, but between the two of them, I sincerely believe support is a lot more significant than parental involvement. But I do agree, after we get the support, we also need the involvement. So I've begun to look at Head Start, to begin to look at Chapter 1, to look at some effective principles in terms of what they do with our students. And I found there are certain things that they do. First of all, we have to find ways to market our programs. I often ask principals, how many parents are going to be there tonight when I speak to them? Well, I don't know. I sent out 1,000 flyers. That tells me right there, they don't know a thing about black culture. Because the rumor is, if you want to make sure black folks don't find out about it, put it in the book. In other words, we are not a written people primarily. It's the oral tradition. If you want me there, call me up. So 1,000 flyers may only generate 10 parents. But a personal invitation, a personal phone call, that's what Head Start does. That's what Chapter 1 does. So they use, first of all, the oral tradition. They find ways to communicate in other ways besides a printed flyer. And then secondly, who determined what the workshop should be about? You see, most schools teach parents the same way they teach children. Well, we decide for them what the workshop should be about. That's a mistake. In other words, if you know the parents are younger these days, are less mature, are changing demographics, then before giving them a workshop on their child's development, why don't you give them one on their own development, on relationships? If you want black men to be there, give them a workshop on the conspiracy to destroy black boys, or how to find a job. In other words, one school district in this country, Cleveland Heights, has a 50-50 black-white school population, but a 97% white PTA. They wanted to bring me in to get more parents to come out, but they were concerned with the title. The title says developing positive self-images and discipline in black children. If they kept the word black in, the white parents may not show up. But if they don't keep the word black in, the black parents may never attend. They keep the word black in and broke a record that night. And black parents say it was the first you finally gave me a workshop about me. Now, of course, let me be honest. There were very few white parents. There were only about 43 of them, about 400 black parents. So the next day, at PTA Council, we're still working on how to get both groups together. But we at least solved the objective. We got more black parents to come out. In other words, what I'm really getting at with regards to this is that black parents have told me, Jawans, I know I need to be there. But if all we're going to discuss is last month's minutes, some budgetary changes, and a couple of personnel changes with a boring speaker, I'm simply not going to be there. I gave you a clue, a boring speaker. Remember in the oral tradition, the strength of the black church, a charismatic speaker. If you want black parents to be there, not only have an interesting topic, but also the speaker has to be one that's able to keep their attention. It's unfortunate we have to do this, but we do. And we have to find ways to continue those kind of marketing efforts. And then, of course, it's always those we always can depend on. For example, providing food. It works almost every time. Providing child care. It works the majority of the time. Providing transportation. If your meeting is at night in a low-income, crime-ridden area, you may need to provide security. And then the one that works every time, have the children perform. In other words, parents, black, white, and Hispanic, and Asian, they all love to see their children perform. You know how many programs I've been on where the choir, not the class choir, the school choir sang before them. And then the principal says, oh, and by the way, we're bringing Dr. Juwanza in for a 30-minute parent workshop. And to make sure you stay, and then the choir will then come back with their clothing selections. It works every time. We have to find those kinds of ways. And why do we have to do that? We have to do that because before 1954, when we had teachers who lived on the same block, who went to the same church. See, black parents have always trusted the teachers. They've always felt that you were the primary educator. I'm now telling parents, unfortunately, you may not be the primary educator. You may not know what's best for their children. A little later on, we're going to discuss on the conspiracy to destroy black boys, the black children are 17% of all children in this country, but they're 41% of all the special ed children. Now, 17 doesn't equal 41. And it gets worse. If a black child is going to be labeled EMR, LD, BD, 85% of the time, it's going to be a black boy. And you see, it's called a staffing, where you have this white principal, white psychologist, white social worker, white teacher, or black in skin but not in consciousness, all telling this parent to sign on the dotted line. And because black parents believe in you, they say, well, whatever you think is best. Now, white parents may agree to LD, but they're not agreeing to the watered-down curriculum of EMR and BD, because they realize that they are the primary educators of their children. And so you can't have it both ways. You can't on the one hand say you want them to be the primary educator, and then when they question you, get offended. You know what they told me? I'm not comfortable talking to teachers. In other words, here we are with our BAs, MAs, and PhDs, and use that kind of jargon vocabulary with these parents. In other words, if you're so secure in your degrees, then why don't you communicate with them? I believe as Jesus said, what you do unto the least of these, you also do unto me. When you are educated, you know how to serve. Many of us are uncomfortable talking with these parents. And so we have to begin to work on those kinds of issues. But some other ideas, because our time is running so tight with regards to parenting. There's a rumor going around that low-income parents cannot produce high-achieving students. Do you believe that? There's also a rumor going around that single parents cannot produce high-achieving students. Do you believe that? And so we don't believe it either. So my book on images and Reginald Clark's book, family life and school achievement, we looked at that. Low income, high income. Single parents, two parents. And what we found out was it was not how much money was in the home. It was not how many parents were there. What it boiled down to was the quality of the interaction. In other words, if you want to produce high-achieving students, we identified 5 common characteristics. First of all, in the high-achieving homes, these parents believe that the world is going to be better for their children. You know, in some homes, the parents are already downtrodden, already beaten, and they transmit a dismal attitude to their children. Well, now in the high-achieving homes, these parents say, well, it may not be all what I want it to be, but it's going to be better for my children. They first of all transmit hope. Secondly, in high-achieving homes, these parents are consistent with their children. You know, in some homes, mama got one rule on Monday, another rule on Wednesday. Not here. There's consistency here. Third, in the high-achieving homes, these parents are complimentary to their children. You know, in some homes, every other word is 4 letters. Not here. These parents praise their children. Fourth, in the high-achieving homes, these parents give their children high expectations. And then last but not least, besides transmitting hope, being consistent, being complimentary, giving high expectations, these parents believe that they are the primary educators of their children. In other words, there have always been 2 kind of parents in America. There's a teacher-parent conference. You want to talk to the parent. Now, the first kind of parent, not in this study, will probably pass the buck. Will probably say, well, I don't know what to do with them either. I got some of my own problems. Can you solve some of mine too? The first kind of parent will pass the buck. But then you get the second kind of parent who will listen to you very carefully. And upon conclusion will say very softly, thank you very much for telling me about my child. Now, if you can just leave us alone for a moment, I can assure you, you won't have that problem anymore in life. Now, you leave the meeting. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but it must be like The Godfather, where the parent gave the child an offer the child could not refuse. Or as Bill Cosby told Theo on the first day of the show, I brought you in here, and I'll take you out. Now, these are the kind of parents we like to have more of. In other words, we want to come back and have a detailed workshop with your parents. It's a 16-step parent involvement program. And it first of all starts with establishing goals. So I believe if you're going to be a good parent, you have to establish goals for your children. And once you have goals for them, then you can go into stage 2, a home program. But you see, you can't even go into stage 2 if you aren't clear on stage 1. In other words, when I ask many parents what kind of goals they have for their children, I hear things like, well, as long as he don't beat me, as long as he gets a job, as long as he stays out of jail. Well, see, if your goals are weak, then your home program will be weak. I have 2 sons, 15 and 10. I only have 3 goals for them. First of all, I want them to put God #1 in their lives. Secondly, I want them to be committed to the liberation of black people. And then third, I want my sons to be the employer rather than being the employee. Now the question is, if these are the goals to my sons, what kind of game plan, home program, or strategy can I develop that will hopefully, and I said hopefully, that's a key word. You see, I control the process. I don't control the result. It's like this workshop. How I give the workshop, my business. How you use the workshop, your business. There's no way I can ever guarantee any of this for my children. You see, I sleep good every night because I understand what I control. I control the process, not the result. But the question is, if my home program is my process, if I want them to put God first in their lives, should they go to church? Should they read the Bible or Quran? What do you mean maybe? If I want them to believe in God, they need to go to church or read the Bible or Quran. Hold on, we'll come back to you a little bit later on.
Okay.
If I want them to be committed to the liberation of black people, should they begin to read black children's literature? Know that King's birthday is January 15th, Malcolm's birthday, May 19th, Garvey's birthday, August 17th, and Kwanzaa in December. They should know that. If I want them to be the employer, should I also give some of my own homework? Not just rely on school homework? You know, we have children that know that 6 times 3 is 18, but when you give them a word problem, they don't know what to do. If you want to train a child, give the skill first. If you want to educate a child, give the need first. We have people with BAs, MAs, and PhDs out of work. Can't make nothing. They have been trained, not educated. We have to work on that. So these are just some of the kinds of ideas we want to share with you with regards to parenting. That we want them to believe they're the primary educator. And that means you have got to share some of the power. In other words, we can't on the one hand say we want them to be the primary educator, and then when they begin to question us, use our authority over them. In other words, it should be a 50-50 proposition with regards to this child's development. Any comments about parenting, the role it plays with regards to our students' achievement? Yes, is it Gwen?
Quinn,
Right.
in terms of helping parents with parenting skills, what do you recommend? You mentioned being where the parents are, and parents are getting younger. I'm thinking again in terms of parenting skills, where let's say that you are in an urban setting and you have many young parents, and they don't seem to know which end is up. You talk about process.
And see, that's my point. Two things. One, I don't believe that there's not a parent in this country that does not want the best for their child. I sincerely believe that. But I also believe that before you deal with child development, you have to deal with self-development. When those parents that are 13, 16, 19, 21 and the like, they have not found themselves yet. And so before giving them a workshop on child development, we have to work with them on their own self-esteem, on their own relationship, on how to find a job. So I believe many times we have not asked them what kind of workshops they're interested in. And Head Start is more successful because they ask the parents what they need, rather than us deciding for them what they should have. Okay? Let me go on because of our time. Let me move to the third area, and that's one of my favorites, and that's the issue of student self-esteem. I sincerely believe that education is more than reading, more than writing, is more than math. It should first of all teach our children who they are. You see, if you don't know who you are, then you will not know what to do with your life. And if you don't know what to do with it, then you won't know how to achieve your goals. So Alex Haley raised the question of who am I? And he asked his mother, father, aunts, and his uncles who he was. Some people told Alex they were Negro. Some told Haley they were colored. Others told Alex they were black. Some said they were Afro-American. Some told Alex they were African. And lastly, some said American. Now, we are the only children and some adults that give 6 different answers to a very simple question like, who am I? Again, you cannot teach a child that is, first of all, not know who he is. It's more important than reading, math, and science. So we began to ask ourselves, why do Germans call themselves Germans? Why do Chinese call themselves Chinese? And we were told there's a land called Germany. There's a land called China. So let's go back to a world map. Germans are Germans, land called Germany. Chinese are Chinese, land called China. Let's go to a world map. Is there a place in the world called Negro land? What about color land? What about black land? What about Afro-American land? There's only 2 answers left, Africa and America. But be honest, what comes to most of our children's mind when they hear the word Africa? Tarzan? Running around, no clothes on, be honest. And what about America, red, white, and blue and apple pie? That's because of this word right here, which is nothing but his story. You didn't know that? It's all history is somebody's story. You know what I'm talking about. Columbus didn't discover America. He was lost. And the end discovered him, and Abraham Lincoln didn't free any slaves. Or another way to look at it, my story is very, very close to the word mystery, and I want to clear up a couple of mysteries right now. The book is titled Great People, Past and Present. What happened to a people that built the pyramids and yet now live in projects? What happened? What happened to a people that are the first to read and write using a term called hieroglyphics and yet now can no longer read or write? In essence, what happened to a people in terms of Egypt? It's amazing. King Tut came to America, and we didn't realize that King Tut was one of us. Somebody mysteriously took Egypt out of Africa and placed it in the Middle East. Now, how do you take a country out of a continent and then call it something else? As a result, we didn't realize that Egypt is in Africa. Egyptians are Africans, and we were the ones that built those pyramids. But my new history book, Lessons from History, Celebration in Blackness, for elementary, and there's also one for high school. You see, we are concerned about some issues here. The first one being, where do you start? You see, we have found that many black youth are embarrassed talking about the history. The Jews, now about the Holocaust, but us about slavery. I think one reason is where you start. The law says where you start will determine where you end up. Now, where do you want to start our children? If they started in 1619, they start on a plantation. That means they'll probably end up in a ghetto. But if you start 4 million years ago on a pyramid, they end up being free. Now, where do you want to start? On a plantation or on a pyramid? Because depending upon where you start will determine where they end up. Our first problem is we've been starting in the wrong place. And you cannot discuss 4 million years in 28 days. Black History Month. Now, I'm glad we got the month. It used to be a week. But you can't discuss 4 million years in 28 days. It's simply not enough time. And then the other issue, what are we going to discuss? You see, if all we're going to discuss are names and dates and events, then you can do that in about 28 days. When was King born? 29. When did he go to D.C.? 63. When did he get the Nobel Prize? 64. When did he die? 68. That would never change. But if you want to make it relevant, you connect the past with the present and with the future. In other words, what were our mistakes? Because the mistakes you want to avoid, and the strengths you want to reinforce. I'll say it clearly. Those that don't know their history, don't know their mistakes, are destined to repeat it over and over and over and over again. Our children need to know their story, and it did not start here. And it should be more than just names and dates and events. But let me calm down and go on. There's still two answers left, Africa and America. But there's a tremendous difference between who you are and where you're born. My hometown, Chicago, the ex-mayor, Daley. If you had asked Daley where he was born, he'd have said he was born in the USA. But ask Daley who he was. Ask him where his roots are. And he'd say his roots are in Ireland. Next stop, East Coast, Philadelphia. The ex-mayor there, Rizzo. If you ask Rizzo where he was born, he too would say the USA. But ask Rizzo who he is. Ask him where his roots are. And he'd say his roots are in Italy. But I think you know what I'm talking about. You and your husband, you and your wife are traveling across the world, and you're pregnant, and you gave birth to a child in Russia. Would your son or daughter be Russian? You're not sure? Next stop, China. And you gave birth to a child in China. Would your son or daughter be Chinese? Hold on. You still not sure? Suppose you gave birth to a child in an airplane in the middle of no place. What are you going to call your child then? Delta Airlines or United Airlines? Just because you're born in America doesn't make you an American. If someone asks you where you're born in America. But if someone asks you who you are, where your roots are, you either say African American or European American or Mexican American, but the who always comes first. Education is more than reading. It should first of all teach you who you are. But you know what else it should teach you? It should make you feel good about yourself. Now the question is, what makes you feel good about yourself? What gives you strong self-esteem? Well, we believe first, your relationship with God. Second, unconditional love from your parents. Third, high expectations from teachers. Fourth, feeling good about your race, color of your skin, and texture of your hair. And lastly, knowing where your talents are. Because of time, I want to look at this one, the issue of race. There's a rumor going around that some of us, hopefully not in this room, are still using terms like good hair. And that to me is deep. You see, if you know what good hair is, then you must know what bad hair is. If you know what pretty eyes are, you must know what ugly eyes are. That's dialectic, the law of opposites. Our bestseller for children is called Colors Around Me. We believe that our children come in all different colors. But no matter what color they are beautiful just the way they are. Now, what I've noticed speaking to the primary grade children across the country, they clap for all of them. So the Emily is brown like chocolate cake and very pretty. And Robbie is red like cinnamon rolls and very handsome. The primary grades clap for all the children. But the upper grade laugh at Michael, who's black like licorice candy. And they also laugh at Joseph, who's black like ebony wood. Now you would think that the older our children are, the greater self-esteem would be. But exactly the opposite. And my question to you, what is it about America's images where the longer these children live here, the less they feel about themselves? And remember, Renee is golden like a peach. And the upper grade clap for Renee, and they laugh at Joseph. Well, the reason is very simple. We allow somebody else to define for us what beauty is. If America defines beauty as light skin, long hair, and blue eyes as beautiful, haven't they told you what ugly is? It must be the exact opposite. It must be dark skin, short hair, and broad features. Once you know what is, you automatically know what's not. But you know what's amazing? When I was in Florida, I found Europeans trying their best to run down to Florida to get a suntan to look like us. And then I found us running home with Noxzema and cream trying to look like them. You didn't know that racism is a sign of insecurity? People that are secure are comfortable with differences. Only insecure people, we need to rationalize because they are different. It makes them better. But let me tease you one step further. It's the first day of school, and Renee comes walking into your classroom with her pretty dress on, her hair floating in the wind. And like all little boys, Joseph comes in behind her. But on this day of accident, on his way to school, did not make it to the executive room in time. Now, do you sincerely believe that Joseph can learn as much as Renee? If you don't, you are unfit to teach our children. There are teachers who believe that Renee is smarter than Joseph. And when they believe that, you just become smarter than Joseph. Do you know how many black women, even in this room, can't swim, afraid their hair's going to go back? Go back to where? Where are you afraid of it going back to? This is deep. Do you think that what happened in slavery is over? Read Peculiar Institution by Kenneth Stamps, the slave-making process. We have to work on those kinds of issues. Before we go into our next workshop on curriculum, any comments about student self-esteem, the role it plays in academic achievement? I believe you cannot do a good job in school if you don't like the way you look. Yes?
How do you attack the racial self-esteem within the peer group? For example, a boy saying she's good looking for a black skin or dark skinned girl, or vice versa. How do you attack that in the peer group? What are some ways of looking at it?
I think we have to confront it head on. In other words, the real damage now is not done between white and black. It's done among the black peer group, black adult as well. And so we have to confront that. We have to show them the beauty and strengths of their color. In other words, we don't have time to discuss this afternoon, but what are the benefits of dark skin? What are the benefits of your natural hair? See, we hear all about the benefits of being light-skinned or being white or having European-style hair. What are the benefits of dark skin? There are a lot of benefits. Yes?
You mentioned that schools should have more than just read, write, arithmetic.
Correct.
What effects do you feel that this new trend of back to basics, you know, it said only teach math, reading, and writing, will that not eventually have effect on how we teach black kids, because boards of education are trying to get away from black history and Black History Month and all that stuff?
Well, I think that those progressive educators realize that back to basics doesn't have to exclude black history, that if the accent is on reading, we don't have a problem with that. We're also in favor of moving to phonetics rather than the sight approach and the word approach. So I don't have a problem with back to basics. But when you have back to basics, just be sensitive about the literature in which you choose. We have to begin to work on those kinds of situations. Because of our time, let me begin to move on. Our next workshop is on curriculum and methodology and learning styles. One of our concerns comes from James Banks, multicultural education. It's the code word now, multicultural. Now my concern is, if it's multicultural, not quote-unquote white history, then we will no longer have world history through European eyes. We will put the event in the middle, and we will see what everyone says about the same event. In other words, we'll call this the Asians and Africans and the Europeans and the Hispanics and the Native Americans. I also gave you a clue. This is also the order of world population. We are not the minority. There are 700 million of us living in the world. Asians are first and we're second. We're not the minority. 80% of the world's population has color. We are not the minority. But the point I want to make here is, if the event goes in the center, not a people, but an event, then we go around the world giving each group an equal amount of time to give their side to the story. That's what will make it multicultural. For example, if the event was Columbus coming to America, Europeans would say Columbus discovered America. But the Native Americans say Columbus was lost and they discovered him. Same event, but these two groups see it differently. Slavery. Europeans would say slavery was good for America. But Africans would say the black family was almost, not quite, was almost destroyed. World War II. Europeans would say World War II was good for the American economy. But Asians would say they were placed in camps in California. Same event, but these two groups see it differently. If it's multicultural, no group is in the center. But when you run the world, then you can do whatever you want. Columbus can discover America. Lincoln can be the one that freed the slaves. You can even make, if you want to, America larger than Africa. Africa is 2.5 times the size of the United States. But when you run the world, you can make America larger than Africa. You can even move Africa over here and put America in the middle. I challenge you, in your school system, do you have maps showing Africa larger than America? Do you have maps that show Africa in the center of the world? That's exactly where it is. A multicultural education. But beyond content, let's also look at learning styles. The work is from Piaget, from Asa Hilliard, from Janice Hale Benson, titled Black Children, Their Roots, Their Culture, Their Learning Style. Remember when you were in school, it's called a split brain theory. The rumor is they're walking around with half a brain. The split brain theory. Remember, when you were in school, the rule was that instructors teach their subjects, but teachers understand how children learn. There are two sides to the brain. There's the right side of the brain, which is holistic. It sees everything. Very good in areas like music and in sports. That's the right side of the brain. But you also have the left side of the brain. very analytical. It breaks things into parts. Very good in math and in science. Now, it has been said in some private academic circles that people of color are better on the right side of the brain, and the people that lack color are better on the left side of the brain. Now, my question to you, did God go to sleep with black folks on the left, but wake up on their right? Did God wake up with Europeans on their left, but go back to sleep on their right? And before you answer, please remember, 86% of the NBA, National Basketball Association, starters are black. But only 1% of the engineers in this country are black. And isn't it true that all black folks can dance? That we all got rhythm? Is it physical or is it cultural? Come on now. Can't hear you. Cultural. Now, I agree with you, Terry, but our children don't. Our children believe, I could probably ask anyone in Cincinnati in terms of the youth to go one-on-one with any white boy on a basketball court, they'd have no problems. But will be scared stiff in the laboratory. I believe as you do. I believe it's culture. But our children believe they have a better chance of doing well on the right side of the brain. You see, my concern is that you do most will be that you do best. But more importantly, that you are allowed to do. We've always been encouraged to sing and dance and play basketball, but not to become involved in math and science. But remember, there are 5 ways to communicate an idea in a classroom. And those 5 are written, which is left brain, oral stories, right brain, pictures, right brain, fine arts, right brain, and artifacts, right brain. There are 5 ways to communicate an idea in a classroom. Most schools use an exclusive left brain methodology and a left brain test with large numbers of right brain thinking children. A tremendous tragedy. There are 2 ways to learn left and right side of the brain. Now, here's the way the exercises go. If you want a left brain lesson plan, it goes like this. Read the definition. Write the definition. Purely left brain. Read it and write it. If you want to go from left, not to right, but left to whole brain, using both sides, read the definition and then draw what you think you just read. Then you'd have to integrate the left and right side of the brain. You know, we have people in this room with BAs, MAs, and PhDs still drawing with stick figures, still drawing like 4th graders. It's not your fault. When you were in school, they belittled the right side of the brain. Let me give you a homework assignment. I want you to develop a right brain lesson plan and then evaluate it with a right brain instrument. We have got to find ways to meet our children where they are. They have a strength that we have not been using. And I wish we could have a lot more time on this major area of learning styles. But because of our time, we're now down to about 5 or 7 minutes. I want to now move into the best for last. I want to now look at teacher expectations. I want to now talk about you. I'm now quoting from the work of Wilbur Brookover and Ron Edmonds. They wanted to find out what was the major reason for academic achievement. I am proud to report 3rd, not number 1, is the student's socio-economic background. Some of us still keep believing, well, how much money is in the home? How many parents are there? It is not number 1. It is 3rd on the list. The 2nd is the school per pupil expenditure. Some of us still keep believing, well, what color is the school bus? How thick is the carpet? But that is also not number 1. How much money is in the school or in the home has never been number 1. Number 1 has never changed. Number 1 remains teacher expectations. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 1920. 1-room school shack, 40 students. The roof was leaking. Only 2 books, and all 40 students learned. Beyond Piaget, beyond Montessori, beyond Glasser, beyond Goodlad, education boils down to one word and one word only. Do you believe that our children can learn? That seems very simple. The key word is expectations. You know the program. It's called TESSA. Teacher expectation, student achievement. The theory is if you increase this, you increase this. What we found out was teachers are human. Many teachers lower expectations on 4 factors. Brookover gives those 4 as race, income, gender, and appearance. In other words, many teachers lower their expectations based upon the race of the child, the income of the child, the gender of the child, and how the child looks. One teacher wanted to give me a number I want to share with you now. She also said, Juwan, I know it's not right, but I also am affected by the parents show up. In other words, I've noticed I respond differently to certain children if I know the parents are involved. I know it's not correct, but that's exactly what I do. 5 major areas that affect expectations. So again, the program is called TESSA. It goes into your classroom with a video camera, with your peers, with an administrator, trying to see if they can monitor expectations. And you know the 3 strands of TESSA. One is response opportunities. Another one is feedback. And the last one is personal regard. What TESTA attempts to do is to see if you can give all 30 children the same number of opportunities. TESTA believes you learn best when you're involved in the process. Now, this is very hard to do. If we were talking about a white teacher with 30 white children, or a blind teacher with 30 blind children, to give all 30 children the same number of opportunities to respond. TESTA believes this is necessary in order to grow and develop. Now, many teachers say is, well, Juwanza, the reason why I don't call on Willie is that Willie don't know the answer. Well, see, the problem is, when you stop calling on Willie back in October, if you wanted to call on him now in May, he wouldn't know the answer because he believes you're not going to call on him anyway. And then the other one I hear so much of, well, time is so tight. I can't afford to waste time on Willie. Well, see, the problem is, that may be correct in the short term. But when we talk about somebody's life that we're now destroying, that could be involved in prison later, in the long term, it's better to call on Willie now than have him taking all that money from us in prison later on. We've got to begin to look at having all the children involved. And then the next area, feedback. 2 students, Willie, the low achiever, and the high achiever. You call on Willie first, he gets the answer wrong. You probably stay with Willie 1 second, then you go on to Ann. She also got the answer wrong, but she's your higher achiever. So you stay with Ann a little long. Come on, Ann, you know it. And they begin to give clue and clue. 5 minutes later, Ann finally comes with the answer. In other words, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That Ann feels better about herself because we've given her more feedback, more reinforcement. And then, of course, the last one, the one I'm concerned about the most, and that's personal regard. That's attitude. TESTA believes you should touch the children. Let them know that you care. Let them know that you love them. So what happens? We send teachers to TESTA training, and they come back saying, I touched you. I love you. I like you. But the problem is the children know it's still not there. It's not real. This cannot be taught. You either love them or you don't. In Cincinnati or wherever we are in the country, please don't put all the schools in the same category. Ron Evans, before he died, developed the Effective Schools Project. What makes effective schools? There are 3 major factors. 1, they have strong leadership. In other words, please don't think every school in Cincinnati or in Princeton County School District are in the same category. Because first of all, good principals spend very little time in their office. You see, the good ones are instructional leaders. They're involved in the classroom. They're involved in the corridors. In other words, they realize they should be involved in the educational process. They get there early and stay late. Paperwork done early. They get involved with the students throughout the day. Good principals also have workshops for their teachers, especially in the 3rd and 4th quarter, where you begin to have teacher burnout. You don't need me now in August and September. Oh, but in January and March and April, where you have teacher burnout, there's some serious problems there. I know you're not going to like this. I also believe the principals should take their teachers out to lunch. Have Teacher of the Month awards. In other words, a good principal is a good coach. They have to find ways to keep their staff motivated. Good schools have strong leadership. Secondly, they have teachers, as I said earlier, who give high expectations. What am I getting at? It has been said that in low-achieving schools, the most negative room in the school is the teacher cafeteria. Because in that room, you hear comments like this. You can't help these children. These children can't learn. And you know what happens? For the new teacher just coming in, they get swayed the negative way. But you see, in a high-achieving school, the principal plants a spy in the teacher cafeteria. They want to know who's making those kind of comments. It's amazing. The good teachers in 201 and 206, you know what they tell me? They don't go to the teacher cafeteria. But the poor ones in 202 and 204, in there all day long. It's amazing how the negative forces do a much better job of organizing than the positive forces. And then the last factor, time on task. There are many schools giving children a lot more time on instruction than other schools. We have to work on these 3 areas: strong leadership, high expectations, and a lot more time on task. Closing point. There are 3 kinds of adults in our classrooms: instructors, teachers, and coaches. We have a lot more instructors than we do teachers. Let me define terms. An instructor means just that. I teach chemistry, teach geometry. I got mine, you get yours. And they mean that. They only deal with their subject matter. They don't deal with learning style. They don't deal with motivation, self-esteem. It's not in their job description. I got mine, you get yours. Now you know what's sad? With a high dropout rate, we have a lot more instructors in the upper grades than we need to. Second group, they not only deal with subject matter, but they also deal with learning style. They realize that children have different learning styles. You know what teachers do? They give right brain lesson plans as well. And they use right brain ways to evaluate learning, not just a test, but hands-on learning activities. And then the last group, they not only deal with subject matter, not only deal with learning style, but they also deal with motivation. They also deal with self-esteem. What am I getting at? You see, a coach understands. Here's how instructors do it. Class, turn to page 10. Now the students probably turn the same level of enthusiasm you said turn to page 10. A coach realizes, I can't teach these children. They first of all don't believe I asked them to offer them. So a coach would close the book and begin to ask, what do your adults tell you? You know what I found out? They say two things. One, get a good education. And the second thing you tell me is to work hard. So then we ask the young people, what do you want to say? Well, get a good education for what? And work hard for who? Now these to me are two very good questions. If working hard was the solution, black people should be running the world. Do you know anybody who's worked harder than us? Our children are tired of being an employee. Quit telling them to get a good education, to get a good job. Teach them they can also be employer. But the real issue here, as our time begins to run down, a good education. They watch you with your good education. But many of us work a J-O-B. Now, if all the good education got you was a J-O-B that you don't like, that means you end up living for T-G-I-F, money. Now, if all you have to do is motivate them with some money, our children are sharp. There are other ways to make this besides a good education, with the four main sources being drugs, sports, music, and crime. You are not going to motivate black youth if all you have to offer them is money. Closing point, the issue is not money. The issue is talents. You didn't know? I'm at work right now. You see, if you have a job, you watch the clock all day long. But if you have a career, then you know where your talents are. And you love what you do so much, you'd be willing to do it for free. But because you do it so well, you get paid for it. Last question. I want all the instructors to raise their hands. I want all the teachers to raise their hands. I want all the coaches to raise their hands. Very good. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a strong round of applause.
And now, here is Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu with his penetrating presentation of countering the conspiracy to destroy black boys.
There's no topic that concerns me more than the one on the conspiracy to destroy black boys. And the reason is when our little boys are in preschool and primary grades, they're very innocent and very enthusiastic about learning. But something happens to that, and we need to find out what that is. My younger son is on the cover of this particular book, and I would like for him to grow up to be a man. Like many of you already told me, that you have sons and male students as well. Now there's two parts of the conspiracy, Volume 1, and this is Volume 2. In Volume 1, we raised 4 questions. First question is, when did the conspiracy start? Who is against black boys? Why is there a conspiracy against them? And what exactly is the conspiracy? That's in Volume 1. In Volume 2, we look at the relationships between mothers and their sons. That must be studied. We also must look at female teachers and black male students. That must also be studied. We must look at some case studies. In other words, many of us are doing a very good job developing black boys to be men. What is it that some of us are doing that others are not doing? And then last but not least, a program called the Rites of Passage into Manhood. See, it used to be we knew when black boys became men. But now many of us don't know when we're men. It's how much reefer we smoke, how much wine we drink, how many babies we make. Until black men spell it out to black boys what it means to be a man, this conspiracy will continue. But let's go back to Volume 1. When did it start? And as we begin to look at that, I want to also share with you why we call it a conspiracy to destroy black boys. You see, contrary to belief at birth, There are more black boys born in the world than there are girls. It's close, but it's 1.03 black boys born in the world to 1.0 black girls. Hear me clearly. At birth, black boys outnumber black girls 1.03 to 1.0. A brief 18 years later, it is now 1.0 available, and that's the key word, available black men, to 1.8 available black women. Almost 2 adult women for every 1 adult man. Now the only question that should be going through your minds right now is what happened? We keep raising the wrong question. We keep asking, why do black men hang on corners? Why do black men lack direction? Well, if you ask this question, you're asking the question 18 to 30 years too late. It is not a conspiracy to destroy black men. It's a conspiracy to destroy black boys. If you destroy him as a boy, he'll never become a man. Now I can look around the room and tell you know where are they. If they are not available to black women, where are they? Call the roll. In jail, there are 329,000 brothers in prison right now. 1 of every 4 brothers will go to prison. Where else? Or death. There's numerous ways that we die. There's homicide, suicide, drugs, war, high blood pressure, and the leading killer among black men, lung cancer. Our love for cigarettes, especially cool. Smoke them all day long, die the exact same way. Cool. Where else? We have prison, death. What else to make us unavailable to black women? Yes, homosexuality. As you said earlier, 1 of every 9 men in this country are homosexual. Where else? Yes.
Hospitalized, institutionalized.
Okay, so institutionalization, and there's not only in terms of hospitals, but also mental institutions, and of course, when they get released, many times being homeless. There's still one other large popular area. Thimby?
They marry white women.
Okay, interracial marriages. Now I want to pause there for a moment, because you would think if anybody is going to marry outside the race, it would be black women. You got 2 black women for every 1 black man. But as Thimby pointed out, it's exactly the opposite. There are 164,000 interracial marriages, of which 116,000 are brothers. That means 48,000 sisters. It's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of black men to black women marrying outside the race. But remember, as you said in the earlier workshop, if the definition of beauty is light skin, long hair, and blue eyes, why stop with Renee, the light-skinned sister? Why not get you the real thing? There's some serious problems here. And then black men tell me, I can't find a black woman to understand me. You mean out of 20 million black women, you can't find one to understand you? You don't need a white woman, you need a psychiatrist. But that's another workshop on relationships. But I just wanted to share with you, we got some very serious problems. But to tease this audience, black women are tired of being by themselves. And in the earlier issue of Essence magazine, the article said, guess who's coming to dinner now? Black women are tired of being by themselves. In other words, brothers, you can't have it both ways. You can't have 2 black women to choose from and still marry a white woman. You can't have it both ways. Black women are tired of being by themselves. Now, that's with regards to the stats, why we wrote the book, because we saw the shortage of black men. But what we want to begin to find out is, when did it start? You see, it's called the 4th grade syndrome. Studies show that black boys may be the best students in the country up until the 4th grade. So we wanted to find out what your son, a male student, was doing at the beginning of the 3rd grade, then at the end of the 7th grade, and then measure the progress. Let me give you 3 examples. We had a little boy 5 years ago on the Alva reading test score at the 98th percentile in the country. In other words, a walking genius. That means only 2% male, female, white, or black had a higher score than he at the beginning of the 3rd grade. At the end of the 7th grade, the same boy now drops down to the 35th percentile. Engineer potential here, pimp or pusher now, scores should have improved 5 years, instead they only improved 1.3. 2 more examples. We had a little boy at the 92nd percentile. He dropped down to the 24th percentile, and his scores only improved 2.1. But let me give you the average example. We had a little boy at the 63rd percentile. He dropped down to the 4th percentile, and his scores didn't improve a year, a month, a week, not even a day. There are 3 critical stages in black boys' development. Infancy to 9, 9 to 13, and 13 to 18. You see, it's easy to see the negative behavior here when he's already dropped out, laid up on some street corner lacking direction. It's more difficult to see it around 9 years of age, when they begin to sit further in the back of the class, when they begin to ask less questions, when their ball becomes more important than their book, when they begin to cheat on their tests. We appeal to you to turn your sons and male students on early. Teach them how to read early. Teach them the beauty of being black and believing in God early. But many of us have waited, and we have waited almost too late to develop black boys to be men. You know what I'm getting at. America spends $2,300 on Head Start. They spend $38,000 on prison. If Reagan wanted to balance the budget, I can show you save about $36,000 per person. It's much easier to educate than it is to incarcerate. Now you raise the questions. How long do you stay in Head Start? Year? 2 years at the most? How long do you stay in prison? The rest of your life? Question number one. Question number two, does Head Start work? A 19-year study documents that Head Start works, but in prison, 85% of the inmates that get released go right back in. But as Jesse Jackson says, we have two choices. We can either send me to Penn State or to State Penn. It's your choice. We have got to find ways to intervene. Now, we have a whole workshop just on the fourth grade syndrome. I now want to ask you, what are some of the reasons you feel to explain why black students, especially black boys, were doing so well K through 3, and now scores declining in the intermediate and upper grades? What explains it? Yes?
The learning style changes abruptly in fourth grade from what might have been more right brain activities in the primary grades into all of a sudden all left brain activities.
Okay, so a change in learning styles or methodology from the teacher, from a holistic learning style to a left brain. Okay, very good. Any others? Yes?
I think that there's a lot of rejection on the part of the female teachers in the classroom.
And the rejection increases with the upper grades? Why do you think it increases?
Because of the students, perhaps his natural makeup, hyperactivity and that sort of thing.
And that may be increasing? Well, it may be increasing because we're now expecting them to stay in school or stay in a chair even longer. Okay. Any others that contribute to this fourth grade syndrome? We have a change in learning style. We have the teacher's outlook on the student. What else? Yes?
The student becomes more culturally aware and differs significantly from the teacher often.
Okay. So the child's now becoming more aware of their culture and racial identity. Okay. Very good. Any others? The major reason you have not given yet, and maybe that's why this problem is still with us, Terry. First name is?
Richard.
I'm sorry, Richard.
Well, the peer group starts to form and become stronger about the peer group.
And that's unfortunate, Richard, that you said that, because as the age increases, the peer pressure is on the increase, while parental involvement is on a decrease. I don't know who told parents when your child gets older, they need less of your time rather than more. When I speak to Head Start parents, 80% of them are there. Elementary school, 30%. High school, almost a joke. We have to work on that. That's another workshop, too, on parenting all the way through, not just in those quote-unquote tender years. But the major reason, it's not on the board yet. Still looking for it. Yes. Gwen?
I think, too, that young boys, and particularly young black boys, in the primary grades, they have many mother figures, and they have very few men figures, and particularly black male figures. And I think it makes a big difference come grade 4.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's the major reason. And let me now get my first position. I sincerely believe that only men can make boys men. Now, don't misquote me. I didn't say that a single female parent or female teacher cannot rear or educate her child. But she need not do that by herself. But she calls upon her father, her brother, an uncle, a male neighbor, a nephew, a co-worker. There needs to be some men in our children's lives. I want to explain to me how a boy is going to grow up to be a man if he's never seen any. In order to be anything, you must see it first. Remember in the earlier workshop, and I'll go through this very quickly, from the University of Michigan, we wanted to find out what the major influence on children. We said 1950 it was home, school, church, peer group, and television. And then we gave you 1980. Home was still number 1, peer group in the number 2 position, television 3, school dropped down to number 4, church last on the list. Let's go back to my statement. My statement said that only men can make boys men. Now let's see where black boys are going to find men. Let's first of all look at his home. 62% of all black children live in a single-run household. It's a very good chance he would now find a man here. I'm going to hold off on the streets and drop down to television. Can you name me 5 positive adult black men on television outside the news? And you can't name Cosby because his show just started. Name me 5. Outside the news. And you better not say George Jefferson. So they find very few black male role models on television. Now let's drop down to the schools. 83% of all elementary school teachers are women. 95% of all teacher age are women. And when do men teach? After the critical 4th grade, or they're in the upper grade, or they're the PE teacher, the janitor, or the principal. Very few before the 4th grade where black boys need them the most. And lastly, the church. Most young people, men, don't go to church. And the reason is we lie to them. First of all, we made Jesus Christ white. The man surely was not white. And we have a book called What Color Was Jesus to explain that. He had hair the texture of wool and feet the color of bronze. But secondly, the Lord's Prayer says on earth as it is in heaven. Young people and men want some action. They want some programs. If there are no programs in your church, they will see you later in heaven. As a result of not finding a man at home, few on television, few in school, and not wishing to attend church, the last place is the streets. And that's the problem. The streets do a very poor job making men. They do a better job making pimps, pushers, and a few basketball players. Their hero, Michael Jordan, has said there were 1 million brothers that won his job last year in the NBA. Of this million, only 400,000 will even make it to play high school ball. Of this 400,000, only 4,000 will make it to play college ball. Of this 4,000, only 35 will go to the coveted NBA. Of this 35, only 7 start. And the average life in the NBA is 4 years. You got 1 million brothers looking for 7 full-time jobs that last 4 years. This conspiracy is complex. It goes beyond the NBA. Even schools are in on it. What will be the first thing you see when you walk into a Cincinnati high school? A large trophy case. In other words, even schools give more glory to their ball players than the scholars. That's said in the earlier workshop. Where are the pep rallies for the honor roll? In other words, even school, I can understand the NBA, but even schools give more glory to their ball players than their scholars. This conspiracy goes beyond the NBA, though. It goes beyond schools. Jesse Jackson is giving you the clue one more time. Is it not possible for a black man to be president? For a white woman to be president? For a black woman to be president? Is the club only reserved for European men? You didn't know that a white boy with a high school diploma makes more money than a white woman, or black man with a college degree? The motive for the conspiracy is clear. For the question of why is there a conspiracy, the answer is white male supremacy. In other words, white men are not afraid of women, black or white, because women have no power anywhere in this world. The threat to European men will come not from women, it will come from other men. And the best way to destroy black men is to destroy them as a boy. The motive is white male supremacy. But before you get comfortable blaming somebody else, let me make sure we're clear. On a conspiracy, there would always be two. You see, you have the active conspirators, and you have the passive conspirator. See, it's like child abuse. There were always two. You have the father who does the beating, active. But you have the mother who turns her back, passive. Isn't apathy, indifference, low expectations, buying hot goods in the black community, isn't that also part of a conspiracy? You have the active and you have the passive. In a conspiracy, there will always be two. Let me now give you the starting lineup. We'll start with the active ones first and then move to the passive. Leading off, batting in the #1 position, representing this country, institutional racism, batting first is Ronald Wilson Reagan. He bats in the #1 position. Batting second, representing the Trilateral Commission, the Fortune 500, big business, David Rockefeller bats #2. Batting third, representing the military complex. You didn't know, black people, 12% of the population, 1/3 of the military, and died 41% of the time in the Vietnam War. Caspar Weinberger bats #3. Batting fourth, and I don't mean Marlon Brando, I mean the real godfather. Drugs running rampant in the black community. Please don't deceive yourself. If America is the #1 power in the world, they could police their borders to stop the drug traffic. These men and what they represent intentionally want to make sure the black boys never grow up to be men. For remember, they got some help from some of us who really like black boys, who may even have black boys at home, just didn't know any better. And so we bat #5 through 9. Batting fifth, not all but some mothers who raise their daughters and love their sons. Batting sixth, some female teachers who don't understand that boys have different learning styles than girls. Batting seventh, representing the media in this country, shows like Gary Coleman and Webster. Shows that make me sick. Shows that illustrate that black men cannot raise intelligent black boys to be men. In other words, we need a white father for Gary Coleman and for Webster. It's all part of the media image. It goes all the way back to Tarzan, all the way back to Superman, all the way back to Rambo, to Rocky, all part of white male fantasy trying to control the world. It's all part of a scheme. Make sure you heard me. It's consistent with Superman, Tarzan, Santa Claus, the white father, all part of that scheme. Batting 8, the macho image, Mr. T, and we'll look at today someone like Prince or Magic Johnson or Isaiah Thomas. In other words, no need to study, just be macho. Just be a superstar. In other words, Mr. T, Prince for entertainment, Isaiah Thomas of Magic for sports. And then last but not least, a black woman by the name of Kathy, who will do anything for a man, and a black man by the name of Willie, who does not feel good about himself. You see your faces right now. Who's Kathy? You have to stay to the end to find out who's who. The starting lineup, Reagan, Rock. No, you don't know who Willie is, though. We got a new theory for you now. We used to end with Donna and Kathy, but now we're going to give you the Eddie Willie theory. We have a new one. So we have we have Ronald Reagan, David Rockefeller, Caspar Weinberger, the Godfather, some mothers. I didn't say all, some. Some mothers, some female teachers, the media image, macho in sports, and Kathy and Willie. These people and what they represent, intentionally or subconsciously, want to make sure that black boys never grew up to be men. Let's now look at the active ones first. I want to make sure we start in the right place. The conspiracy did not start with black mothers. It started somewhere else. We must start where it began. It began with active conspirators. I want to now look at them first. In looking at the active conspirators, I want to make sure we understand that these kind of terms don't make sense. We are not the minority. In other words, there are 4.5 billion people living in the world. Of this number, 80% of the world's population has color. That means only 20% of the world's population lacks color. Now you tell me who's the minority. You see, it's called the African Triangle. It goes all the way back. We're not the minority. We're only a minority. We allow ourselves to be divided up from our brothers and sisters in Nigeria, in Jamaica, in the United States. Look at this African Triangle. After all these years, other than the way we're dressed, you can't tell who's who. There are 1 billion people living in China alone, and we are second. 500 living in Africa, 160 living in Central and South America, 40 million living here in the United States. We are not the minority. Now, the question is, how can so small control so much? That's why I respect them so much. Think about it. You have a gang. You have one gang with 80 people, another gang with 20, and the 20 going to win? The only way they can do that is by controlling the mind. Because whoever controls the mind will also control the body. Let's look at this. Let's break this down in half. What you come up with is 10% European women and 10% European men. See, it's not even 20. It's really 10% European men. In other words, Reagan, Rockefeller, Weinberger, Gorbachev, Botha, they want to control not their countries. They want to control the world. And they have pulled this off. Now, there's a tremendous amount of pressure when you're this small trying to control so much. Now, maybe you can't understand it. It's been a long time. It goes back to Egypt for us, having that much power. But can you imagine that small number trying to control the world? A tremendous amount of pressure is on that small group with that much power. In other words, the first thing that men are taught to do is not to cry. I'm quoting from their own Goldberg. The book is called The Hazards of Being a Male. The tremendous pressure when you're so small trying to control so much. The first thing that men are taught to do is not to cry. Think about it. Ever seen Ronald Reagan cry? John Wayne cry? They died with their boots on. They died in their saddles. They died like men. Now, any psychologist will tell you that crying may avoid suicide later. But as a result of European men not crying, European men commit suicide more than anybody else. Black men who want so much to be like European men are very close second. European women are third, and the most sane person in America, she don't make no money, but stay close to God and her children and cry. Black women commit suicide less than anybody else. Give yourself a hand clap. In other words, if you think that money is the source of all your happiness, they make more money than anybody else. But they obviously are not happy. In other words, money may not be the key. Putting God and your children first may be the key. Poorest people in America commit the less amount of suicide. First thing men are taught to do is not to cry. Second thing men are taught to do is to ignore pain. Got hypertension? Shake it off. Cancer? Shake that off too. Monday Night Football. Walter Payton goes off the field with a busted knee. Comes back on a half hour later and the Holocaust sells us. Oh, what a man. The man was crazy to go back on the field. But you see, men are taught to be macho, to ignore pain. Not women. When women's finger bleeds, to the doctor's office. Women take care of themselves, but not men. You know it's gotten so bad that studies have now documented that when men are married, they live longer. That's an insult to my intelligence. It means that I cannot live long by myself. I got to leave my mama and go to my wife. Because if I don't, I'm probably going to smoke cigarettes, drink liquor, and eat a lot of pork on the streets. But with women, annual checkup, that's what they encourage men to do. Drink a regular amount of water and eat a salad on a regular basis. What am I getting at? European women say they're so oppressed. European women lived at 77 years of age. Black women lived at 75 years of age. European men died at 69 years of age, and black men die at 64.8. Albert, you and I die before the first Social Security check. That law needs to be changed to lower it for us. We aren't living long to collect on the payment. This is sad. I'm gonna die 10 years before my wife. This is not theoretical. It's not just my son here. It's my life here and your life. Can I not live as long as my wife? 10 years before her? Men are first of all taught not to cry. Secondly, they're taught to ignore pain. And then last but not least, they're taught to bring home the bacon. Or as I say, the vegetarian, to bring home the fruit and the vegetables. In other words, to bring home the money. Ronald Reagan knows this. Rockefeller knows this. That the best way to destroy black men is to deny them the opportunity to work. You know what I'm getting at, because Bill Moyers didn't tell you that was Vanishing Black Family documentary. 1 of every 3 marriages in this country, black or white, ends in a divorce in 18 months. Now you see, it used to be if you got a divorce, something was wrong with you. But when you have a stat this high, something must be going on in our society. I now want to explain what that is. When America believed in agriculture, America believed in extended family. When America believed in the factory, industrialism, America believed in the nuclear family. But now that America believes in the computer, now America believes in a single-parent family. Make sure you see my analysis. When the economy changed, the family structure changed. There was more than love in these relationships. There was some money involved here. Our grandparents worked the fields together, had economic reason to stay together, and so they did. In the factory, man works in the factory, woman takes care of children. Economic reason again to stay together. But in this new economy, where you now have women working just as much, if not more, than men, you now hear women telling men, I don't need you. Got my own job. Do what I want to do when I want to do it. And we are now doing it very well and by ourselves. You know the #1 song in America a couple of years ago, Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent.